நீங்க பண்ணலாமே. பண்ண முடியல. நீங்க தான் மீட்டிங் போடுங்க. எஸ். நீங்க எப்படி அலோவ் பண்றது? எங்களுக்கு கொடுங்க பெர்மிஷன். ஒரு நிமிஷம் வரேன். ஈஸியா தானே இருக்கும். இதுக்கு முன்னாடி பண்ணிருக்காங்களே. அப்படிலாம் இல்லையே. ஒரு நிமிஷம். நான் பாத்துக்கிறேன். என்னன்னு பாருங்க. அது வருது.
So, nice to meet you. Great joy to be here. Actually, a daydream coming true to speak with you and to give you some thoughts on one of the books we could publish after 10 years of work on a biography on Hermann Kallenbach, Mahatma Gandhi's friend in South Africa. I'll tell you about Gandhi speaking about Kallenbach so that you understand how close the friendship was between them. And later, after introducing to his book, published in 1997 in the English language and in the German language, I would like to introduce our work a bit, our Society for Education. We have started this work more than 30 years ago, and it might be interesting for you to know what we are doing in the field of adult education for peace and violence. Myself, I visit you now first time here in Chennai, and I am from Berlin, Germany, and my research on Gandhi started during the 80s, and we first published booklets. One of these are here in English language, Tolstoy and Gandhi, beginning of the 90s, and then we published some booklets, Correspondence of Tolstoy and Gandhi, in 1997, and a book about Martin Buber and Gandhi, with documents in English language. So then, continuing the correspondence of Bart, Ligt, the Dutch pacifist, and Gandhi on war and peace between 1928 and 1930, that was in the year 2000, and continued with essays and articles on Tolstoy and Gandhi mainly, and also creating exhibitions on non-violence, 13 of them in English language between 2008 and 2020. You find them on our website. I can show you our website, and you can see these exhibitions. I'm speaking in English language to you because this is the medium. So my first language is German, but I put work on the Kallenbach biography because I met the relatives of Hermann Kallenbach, who lived in Haifa, in Israel, and that's why they invited me to their home. It was in 1987, and then I visited them, and they asked me to build up their private archive together with a couple, an old couple living in Haifa, a medical doctor. I was compiling all the documents in 2 flats together to build up the archive on Hermann Kallenbach. And then I was asked to write the first concise biography on Hermann Kallenbach. Maybe you will see, we show the book again, yes. And this book was published online some years ago, and also you will find this book, you can read this book, but the print copies are, can say, no longer available, just have the digital copy. I would like to read some passages of this book to you, that you get some impression, and start with Gandhi on Kallenbach. When Kallenbach died in 1945, Gandhi wrote, "South Africa has lost a most generous-minded citizen, and the Indians of that subcontinent a very warm friend. In Hermann Kallenbach's death, I have lost a very dear and near friend. He used to say to me often that when I was deserted by the whole world, I would find him to be a true friend going with me, if need be, to the ends of the earth in search of truth." And Gandhi would write in a letter to his former secretary, Sanja Schlesin, who had been introduced to Gandhi through Hermann Kallenbach from the Rosenberg family in East Prussia. After Hermann Kallenbach's death, Gandhi wrote about Kallenbach, "A truly good man has left us." The fact that Hermann Kallenbach came from a small village, nowadays Lithuania, shall not betray us that Hermann Kallenbach was a German citizen. Even through his years as a successful architect in South Africa, he remained a German citizen, and then he was interned during the First World War as a prisoner of war in the enemy aliens detention camp at Nakalo on the Isle of Man. So that's why he could not accompany Gandhi to India. So if you see now, that we say a movie about Gandhi, don't get yourself betrayed. Kallenbach worked together with Gandhi during the South African years. Of course, he was really fulfilling a mission when he visited Gandhi twice during the 30s, in 1937 and 1939. And when he died in 1945, it was because of the after effect of malaria. And this was one tragedy, because he caught this malaria during his journeys. But I don't want to shed light to you this evening on Kallenbach's visits at Gandhi's place in the 30s. This would be another lecture. I would like to start from the beginning and shed some light on Kallenbach, who was the founder of Tolstoy Farm together with Gandhi. Both of them had a correspondence with Tolstoy. You can find in our book. And this correspondence related to Tolstoy's letter to Indian or letter to Hindu, which was published by Gandhi in South Africa. He received the permission also to name his second farm settlement after Tolstoy. And Kallenbach and Gandhi corresponded with Tolstoy, and Kallenbach visited the translators of Tolstoy in England and Scotland, Isabella Mayo, Charles W. Daniels, Elmer Maud, who also visited the Tolstoy colony early, and Free Age Press, small booklets, Tolstoy's articles and pamphlets, which were very influential during this period of time, about nonviolence and peace, non-resistance to evil. And Gandhi and Kallenbach even supported the widow of the station owner who hosted Tolstoy during his last days, when the station owner had died and the widow became poor. Such a great affection for Gandhi or Tolstoy, the writer for peace against war, in favor of non-violence. Now I would like to give you an idea how intelligent Gandhi was when he described these interesting different characters, different qualities which Kallenbach incorporated. He said, when he wrote a letter to Kallenbach as an enemy alien prisoner of war, your life there must be a model for the others. This is what Gandhi wrote to Kallenbach. Your life there must be a model for the others. How I would love to think that you are there, vindicating your German birth, your ancestral Jewish faith, and our joint ideals. You vindicate the first two, German Jewish, if you realize the third, Satyagraha. And I know you will not fail. And Gandhi missed Kallenbach during his campaign in Chandra very much. He wrote affectionate letters. Kallenbach at his side to continue Satyagraha. Now, who was Hermann Kallenbach? Born in 1871 in a small village he was raised called Rus, where you find now a sculpture of Kallenbach and Gandhi. I could also facilitate to bring about in Lithuania. It was 9 years ago. And 1 year later, the sculpture was inaugurated by the the son of grandniece of Hermann Kallenbach. He decided to happen to meet a few days ago again after many years in Berlin. And also by you say those who try to follow the path of peace in Lithuania. So there's a sculpture of Gandhi and Kallenbach now at Kallenbach's birthplace in Russia. It's near the Russian exclave. Former cities, city names were Königsberg, Memel, nowadays Klaipėda and Kaliningrad. And this was the area East Prussia, where Kallenbach came from, and also Sonja Schlesien from the Rosenberg family. And so you can say these were German citizens with Russian descent from the Kalmanovich family. And it was a family of lawyers, by the way. You find this reference in our biography, which you can read. And so Kallenbach's father was a Hebrew teacher, became a timber merchant, and owned a sawmill at the So he was the third eldest of 7 children, and the youngest brother, Samuel Kalmanovich, the uncle of Hermann Kallenbach, was a barrister at law. You remember the barrister at law. So, and he succeeded as a lawyer in a very famous case. And Kallenbach was not brought up in a Jewish shtetl, but his parents observed the Jewish holidays and customs, but they were educating their one daughter, Janet, and 6 sons, Samuel, Hermann, Jeremiah, Simon, Nathan, Max, by sending them to German schools and colleges at Memel and Tilsit. And Hermann Kallenbach liked to make all these anti-Semitic stereotypes of his age. So he was a Muslim Jew, let's say, according to Max Norman. His higher studies, apprenticeship and vocational training, interrupted by 1 year of military service. After his school in East Prussia, he received his technical skills in the western and southern parts of Germany. Studied in college, Tilsit, until Easter 1890. Apprenticed during summer 1890 to a master carpenter based in Königsberg. Studied at the Technikum Strelitz. Continued his apprenticeship in Königsberg and Tilsit. Studied at the Royal School for Architects in Stuttgart. Summer of 1892, he was apprenticed to a master mason, continued his studies in Stuttgart. In 1893 and 1994, he worked as draftsman and clerk of works at the offices of architect Meisenbacher in Stuttgart. Then he served for 1 year the Royal Engineers in Munich, continued his studies in Munich, passed his examinations in 1896, so he was a mason, a carpenter, a building technician, and an architect. Then he left for South Africa. That was the perspective, becoming a successful architect in South Africa. To join his uncles, Henry and Simon Secchi, in Johannesburg. So he liked ice skating, swimming, cycling. Just he embodied strength. firmness. He was endowed with a sense of justice, and he disliked any kind of discrimination which he faced in Germany, South Africa too. So he always compared the situation of the Jewish community situation with those who were discriminated. He was in solidarity with those who suffered from discrimination. So I can go on like this forever, but I would like to come to the essentials. Because you should then know how they met, Gandhi and Kallenbach. Chapter 2, Friendship with Gandhi. We met by accident. He was a friend of Mr. Khan's, and as the latter had discovered deep down in him a vein of otherworldliness, he introduced him to me. A vein of otherworldliness was Gandhi's word. Something nowadays we might call spiritual, some spiritual aspiration. Something which was going beyond his profession. So he was a friend of Mr. Khan, a Mohammedan warrior. And Mr. Gandhi is the political leader of the Indians in South Africa. The number of Indian inhabitants is at the moment over 150,000 in Transvaal, Orange River Colony, Orange Free State, Natal, Cape Colony, and Rhodesia. These people have never received an equal political standing as the rest of the European inhabitants enjoy, and they require a leader of the moral caliber of a personality as Mr. Gandhi. Mr. Gandhi is also the editor of a journal called Indian Opinion. He expresses for his people their wishes and their needs, also educational requirements. He represents them to the authorities in their most dire needs. For this purpose, he has founded a colony named Phoenix, about 14 miles from Durban, on which approximately 16 persons have made their homes, helping in agricultural aspects of country life. There is a school, a prayer room, and a machinery for a printing press. The system of this colony is to educate and show them a way of life in which they can live as an example to their fellow Indians. A tremendously modest and yet a lovable way of life. I do not intend to join the community of this colony. As we know, Kallenbach then joined the Tolstoy farm, but not Phoenix. Gandhi had founded this Phoenix settlement in Natal in December 1904. Phoenix settlement was inspired by John Ruskin essays on the principles of political economy until this last, which Pollock, H.S.L. Pollock, Jewish English secretary of Gandhi, had recommended to them. And Kallenbach later became the responsible trustee of Phoenix settlement. And Phoenix became the model experiment for the unique Tolstoy farm. When I came to know him, I was startled at his love of luxury and extravagance. This is what Gandhi wrote about Kallenbach. But at our first meeting, he asked searching questions concerning matters of religion. We incidentally talked of Gautama Buddha's renunciation. Our acquaintance soon ripened into very close friendship, so much so that we thought alike. He was convinced that he must carry out in his life the changes I was making in mine. And he was convinced that he must carry out in his life the changes I was making in mind. This is what Gandhi wrote about Gandhi. These changes were multifold. Gandhi influenced Kallenbach to become a vegetarian. They often changed their diet. Quote, cooking was practically done away with. Raw groundnuts, bananas, dates, lemons, and olive oil composed our usual diet. They reduced their expenses and deprivileged themselves. Quote, our ambition was to live the life of the poorest people. Non-stimulating foods were used in their saltless diet, and regular weekly fasting served to control the palate and to reduce the passions. By spiritual discipline, they wanted to root out the carnal desires of mind and body and the greed for luxuries. Kallenbach revolutionized his life by reducing his monthly expenses from 75 to 8 pounds sterling. 75 to 8 pounds sterling. It was a fairly hard life that we led. Gandhi retrospectively remembered their reformed life. He is a man of strong feelings, wide sympathies, and childlike simplicity. He is an architect by profession, but there's no work, however lowly, which he would consider to be beneath his dignity. When I broke up my Johannesburg establishment, I lived with him, but he would be hurt if I offered to pay him my share of the household expenses and would plead that I was responsible for considerable savings in his domestic economy. This was indeed true. So voluntary simplicity became the constitution of their life in self-reliance. In the Kraal, Rondel's district orchards in Johannesburg, and at the Mountain View, Linksfield, Johannesburg, and later on during their settlement life on Tolstoy farm. Kallenbach wrote to his brother Simon in Germany, for the last 5 weeks we have no native servant, and therefore we are attending ourselves to all our work. We cook, bake, scrub, and clean the house and the yard. We polish our own shoes and work in the flower and vegetable garden. We are leading a most unusual life which helps the person to develop more independently, and the person becomes better. Mr. Gandhi is a vegetarian according to his religious conviction as a Hindu. For the last 2 years, I have given up meat eating. For the last year, I also did not touch fish anymore. And for the last 18 months, I have given up my sex life. I believe that I have gained in character, strength, mental vitality, and physical development. My bodily well-being has become better and bigger. I have never been eccentric, and I believe I am not so now. I have changed my life, my daily life, in order to simplify it, and I found out that in every direction, this change has helped me, and I hope that I shall be able to continue my life accordingly. Notwithstanding, I shall change my life even tomorrow, should I feel that this way of living should not suit me. So they addressed each other, lower house, Kallenbach, and upper house, Gandhi. Kallenbach was the lower house and Gandhiji the upper house. The lower house preparing the budget, and the upper house vetoing large chunks of it. In the English Parliament, there is a Senate. In the English English Parliament, there is a Senate, upper house, and the executive lower house, or the lawgiver, and the one who carries out the laws. In 1908, Kallenbach bought a car to surprise Gandhi and fetch him home from prison in Johannesburg. But Kallenbach was surprised to find Gandhi completely silent on their way home. For Gandhi, the car was an unnecessary expense. For 1 year, the car stood in the garage, unused, and Kallenbach sold it. During a voyage in 1914, Gandhi threw 2 pairs of Kallenbach's binoculars into the sea. The second pair was a precious gift to Kallenbach from his uncle Seki. All unnecessary luxuries were disposed of by Gandhi into the rubbish heap. For instance, silver rings for Soviets, because superfluous luxuries would cause distress. On the morning on which he had to go to meet General Smuts at Pretoria for a very important interview, I found him berating me severely for something or other that had happened in our domestic affairs, something perhaps that I had omitted to do. I remonstrated with him, saying it was no use his wasting his time over domestic trifles when he must be thinking of the interview he was going to have with General Smuts. No, he flared up and said, these little things are to me of as much importance as the big ones, for they touch the very core of our life, and truth is one whole. It has no compartments. And thus I have seen him on small as well as big occasions pursuing the same passionate search of truth. I have had the privilege of sharing his joys and his sorrows too. A defeat in a campaign means not so much to him as the lapse of a dear one from truth or purity. And I was witness once to one such event coming to him with a staggering blow. But I saw the reason of his distress over these incidents. He lavished his affection on me, and therefore dealt with me more severely than he would have done with others. It was the tyranny of his affection. But that affection is my proudest possession. Now, chapter 3. Not many more chapters, just 2 more. So, chapter 3. A staunch Tolstoy. We can show this last photo. The last photo you see is from Indian Opinion. A staunch Tolstoyan. See? Mr. Kallenbach walking from Tolstoy farm to Johannesburg. A staunch Tolstoyan. Supplement to Indian Opinion. 1912. Read Tolstoy and tell me what you think of his teachings. What Tolstoy wants and what I too am striving for is to recognize the right and to live accordingly without disturbing my fellow beings as far as possible. To give one's opinion, give advice, to become a world reformer might be the ideal of many, but it is not Tolstoy's. He says, live according to the right once you have recognized it. Each one according to his capacity to realize it. Never disturb your fellow beings. Carry out in practice that which you considered right in theory. Frederick the Great was to have said, each one should seek salvation according to his own fashion. Accordingly, everyone will execute the right as far as his understanding, his courage, his energy, and his circumstances allow him. To realize the right in theory, this is what Tolstoy wants to teach us, and not only from his books, but from his new way of life. Hermann wrote these lines to his brother Simon when he was living on Tolstoy farm. A communal settlement, as we know, for the Indian families, the husbands in prison as satyagrahis. Mr. Kallenbach has given the name Tolstoy Farm to the farm which he has offered for the use of the satyagrahi families. He has great faith in Count Tolstoy's teaching and tries to live up to it. He himself wants to live on the farm and follow a simple mode of life. It appears Mr. Kallenbach will gradually give up his work as architect and live in complete poverty. Mr. Kallenbach has rendered a valuable service by offering the use of his farm, but more so by deciding to live among our people. He has also agreed to look after the women folk in the absence of Mr. Gandhi. That any white should be moved by such a spirit must be attributed to the power of satyagraha. Gandhi exchanged letters with Tolstoy, asking for permission to continue their communitarian experiment in his name, Tolstoy Farm. Tolstoy morally supported his brothers and sisters in the Transvaal. He learned from the first biography on Gandhi by Joseph Doak how the non-violent campaigns of Upper House and Lower House agreed with his principle of non-violent non-cooperation with injustice. At that time, all over the world, settlers were inspired by Tolstoy. Many examples for this. Now, referring to Tolstoy farm. The farm measures about 1,100 acres, being 2 miles in length and 3/4 of a mile in breadth. It is situated near Lawley Station, 22 miles from Johannesburg. It takes 20 minutes to walk down from the station to the farm. By rail, generally takes about 1.5 hours to reach it from there. The soil appears to be fertile. The farm is about 1,000 fruit-bearing trees growing on it. There are peaches, apricots, figs, almonds, walnuts, etc. In addition, there are eucalyptus and wattle trees. The farm has 2 wells and a small spring. The landscape is beautiful. At the head there is a hill with some more or less level land at the foot. This is a very important venture. Its roots go deep. It is up to the satyagrahis who settle there to make it bear sweet fruit by the way they live. So that was on May 30, 1910, when Kallenbach had offered his farm and the use of the buildings to the Indian families free of any rent of charge, as long as the struggle with the Transvaal government lasts. Since June 4, 1910, Kallenbach, Gandhi and 2 of his sons settled on Tolstoy farm. The vegetarian Kallenbach liberated himself from tobacco, alcohol, intoxicants, wholeheartedly dedicated his service to his Indian friends with whom he shared their life on the farm. What will perhaps appeal most of all to the Indian community is the way in which Mr. Kallenbach, literally as well as figuratively, takes off his coat for the work of helping the cause he has made his own. We are having a very busy time with our farm work. The pruning of the fruit trees, cultivating the soil and manuring of a large vegetable garden, and planting of new fruit trees. I have had erected a new windmill, which which is pumping about 900 gallons of water per hour into the reservoir, 130 feet high. From the reservoir, I have laid pipes to 3 different buildings and also to the vegetable garden. The day could have double as many hours, and I would still be as busy as ever. In Potchefstroom, Kallenbach had studied governmental model gardens, and his experience was the basis for the agricultural planting. For there were no servants on the farm, and all the work from cooking down to scavenging was done by the inmates. There were many fruit trees to be looked after, and enough gardening to be done as well. Mr. Kallenbach was fond of gardening and had gained some experience of this work in one of the governmental model gardens. It was obligatory on all, young and old, who were not engaged in the kitchen, to give some time to gardening. The children had the lion's share of this work, which included digging pits, felling timber, and lifting loads. This gave them ample exercise. They took delight in the work, and so they did not generally need any other exercise or games. Kallenbach learned sandal making from the German Trappist monks in Marian Hill Monastery. After completing his course, he taught this art to Gandhi and others at Tolstoy farm. Carpentry, planting of fruit trees, gardening, open air work, learning by doing, contributed greatly to the health of all the inmates. They reduced their expenses in order to be able to continue the Satyagraha campaign. Voluntary simplicity, village life, basic education through vocational training, craftsmanship and agricultural work, ethics of renunciation, vegetarianism and chastity, non-violent resistance and non-cooperation with the evil. These were the principles which Leo Tolstoy had advocated. Of them. We place a very high value on Mr. Kallenbach's offer of his farm for the benefit of Satyagrahis. If the families of the latter use it well, we shall have no occasion for anxiety, however long the struggle lasts. There will be much saving and expenditure, and those who settle on the farm will learn to be happy. They will have on the farm a noble life in place of the unclean and monotonous ways of town life. Moreover, what they will learn on the farm will prove useful for a lifetime. Indeed, we have said in the past that the Indian community would be well rewarded if it were to take to agriculture and would be saved the anxieties incidental to business. We have to pay a heavy price for not recognizing the value of this best of occupations. Partial life, so a good life according to John Ruskin. Actually, this is what Gandhi learned from John Ruskin. Now, this was a model for later ashrams in India also, Tolstoy found. Mr. Kallenbach has given all he legitimately could and has expected no return. He does not want to develop his estate through the labor of those passive resistors who could put in their labor without paying them for it. Acts such as Mr. Kallenbach's are calculated to bring East and West nearer in real fellowship than any amount of rhetorical writing or speaking. We shall watch this experiment with very great interest. And then we chapter 4 of the Epic March. And I would like, this was this cross-border march of so many risking their lives. The Epic March started on November 6, 1913, when 2,037 men, 127 women, 57 children offered prayers and commenced the pilgrimage in the name of God, crossed the border between Natal and the Transvaal between Charleston and Folkestone. In 2 days before, Europeans met in Folkestone to publicly threaten the Indians with violent shooting. So what I will tell you now is not the huge organizational work Kallenbach and his fellow secretaries of Gandhi undertook to bring this march to a success. Not only them, as you know, but also Tamil Nadu and the Tamil community. Without this support, without these activities, the epic march would have succeeded. But in this meeting in Folkestone, everything was decided. Would there be a massacre, or would there be bloodshed, or would it go successfully? It was Hermann Kallenbach who converted their minds. So Europeans met, so also Hermann Kallenbach could meet. So he joined the meeting. Mr. Kallenbach attended this meeting to reason with the Europeans, who were, however, not prepared to listen to him. Indeed, some of them even stood up to assault him. Mr. Kallenbach is an athlete, having received physical training at the hands of Sandro, and it was not easy to frighten him. One European challenged him to a duel. Mr. Kallenbach replied, "As I have accepted the religion of peace, I may not accept the challenge. Let him who will come and do his worst with me, but I will continue to claim a hearing at this meeting. You have publicly invited all Europeans to attend, and I am here to inform you that not all Europeans are ready as you are to lay violent hands upon innocent men. There is one European who would like to inform you that the charges you level at the Indians are farce. The Indians do not want what you imagine them to do. They do not wish, the Indians do not want what you imagine them to do. The Indians are not out to challenge your position as rulers. They do not wish to fight with you or to fill the country. They only seek justice, pure and simple. They propose to enter the Transvaal, not with a view to settling there, but only as an effective demonstration against the unjust tax which is levied on them. They are brave men. They will not injure you in person or in property. They will not fight with you, but enter the Transvaal they will, even in the face of your gunfire. They are not the men to beat a retreat from fear of your bullets or your spears. They propose to melt, and I know they will melt your hearts by self-suffering. This is all I have to say. I have had my say, and I believe that I have thus rendered you a service. Beware and save yourselves from perpetrating a wrong." With these words, Mr. Kallenbach resumed his seat. The audience was rather abashed. The pugilist who had invited Mr. Kallenbach to single combat became his friend. So now maybe to end my talk, I just want to give the last words Kallenbach shared with his friends at the farewell banquet, which was given in the Masonic Hall, Johannesburg, in honor of Gandhi, Kasturba, and Kallenbach on July 14, 1914. They were presented addresses of the British Indian Association, the Chinese Association, the Tamil Benefit Society, the Transvaal Indian Women's Association, and the Gujarati, the Mohammedan, and the Parsi communities. At the farewell meeting in the town hall, of Durban, Gandhi thanked the community on behalf of Kallenbach, who was another brother to him, for the addresses presented. The community had done well in recognizing Mr. Kallenbach's worth. Mr. Kallenbach would tell them that he came to the struggle to gain. He considered that by taking up their cause, he gained a great deal in the truest sense. Mr. Kallenbach had done splendid work during the strike at Newcastle, and when the time came, he cheerfully went to prison, again thinking that he was the gainer and not the loser. So there were, you can say, receptions after their arrival in Cape Town, and representatives of Indian communities from Port Elizabeth to Madras places expressed their gratitude. With reference to his cooperation with his dear friend and guide, Mr. Gandhi, Hermann Kallenbach summarized in his farewell speech what the years of Satyagraha meant to him and what these profound experiences should teach to the South African Indians. Kallenbach said, "You have made me understand better my own religion. You have made me love more my own people. You have helped me to be less arrogant, less slothful, and you have made me become more truthful." And then he gave his advice before saying goodbye, farewell. "If I may place before you my humble views, I may say the first and foremost condition is that the two principal sections of the Indian community in South Africa, Muslims and Hindus, must live in peace, and that those members of the two communities who take up this peace work in thought and in action in real earnest are performing the greatest service to their community here and to their motherland. Second, not only retain outwardly, but profess and practice also inwardly under the new conditions of life created in South Africa, your religions. Muslims to be true and become truer Muslims, and Hindus to be true and become truer Hindus. The third, not to be ashamed, but on the contrary, to be proud of these Indian customs and habits, which your acknowledged true men have practiced for thousands of years, and which true men are practicing now and hold so sacred. If these three conditions are striven after and made progress in, you do not require Gandhis here, as every one of you will be a Gandhi, to a certain extent. And no oppression, often through selfish interests produced by and even forced upon the communities you live with by modern civilization, can never assail you. Photos.
No, 9 minutes questions.
Let's go.
This one?
Yeah.
Questions. You wanted to show some pictures.
Just a few,
Yes,
maybe.
yes.
This is
The pictures காமிக்க போறாங்க சார் முடிச்சிங்க.
This is Kallenbach when we this reunion with Gandhi. Wonderful photos. He was called Uncle Hermann. This with Meru, the reference on the left, you see Kallenbach and Gandhi sitting together. This is Kallenbach. See, in his room, this is Tolstoy farm inhabitants. This is the crowd in Johannesburg. This is the Phoenix settlement. This is with his family. With his family in Eastern Russia.
Can I ask you a question? Please. There is an Abacus of Mahatma Gandhi written by one Joseph Ligt.
I know.
You have read it and you approve what he has.
I know.
Thank you.
The crowd that were living together, but you have just listened to Hermann Kallenbach's own words that he gave up his sex life, so don't worry about this. I think he was a spiritual friendship. Actually, the unifying point was Buddha and compassion and renunciation, and Tolstoy. I already mentioned all the virtues and all the recommendations Tolstoy gave to so many people all over the world. And if you really study the texts related to Kallenbach and Gandhi, you find that there were really bringing this legacy of Tolstoy to a successful end. And I would like to give you even the nucleus of this legacy, because Tolstoy's last letter reached Gandhi and Kallenbach when Tolstoy had already died. It was a testament, and he passed on his legacy literally to Gandhi. And he wrote in his last letter in 1910 extensively about Christianity and all the flaws and deficiencies in the institutionalized religions. But then also he gave an example in that respect, how nonviolent resistance can be exerted even by young girls in such a brave way that they are a model example for the world. So this was included in his last letter to Gandhi. I would like to read this small passage. It is quite relevant, I would say, nowadays. This spring, in the religious examination of a secondary school of girls in Moscow, the professor of catechism as well as the bishop had questioned the young girls on the 10 commandments and above all on the 6th, "Thou shalt not kill." When the examiner received good reply, the bishop generally paused for another question. Is killing prescribed by the sacred law always and in all cases? And the poor young girls, perverted by their teachers, must reply, no, not always. Killing is permitted during war and for the execution of criminals. However, one of these unfortunate girls, what I relate is not a fiction, but a fact that has been transmitted to me by an eyewitness. One of these unfortunate girls, having been asked the same question, is killing always a crime, was moved deeply, blushed, and replied with decision, yes, always. To all the sophisticated questions habitual to the bishop, she replied with firm conviction, killing is always forbidden in the Old Testament as well as by Christ, who not only forbids killing, but all wickedness against our neighbors. in spite of all his oratorical talent and all his imposing grandeur, the bishop was obliged to beat a retreat, and the young girl came out victorious. That's Satya.
I have a question. You haven't touched about the aspect where Kallenbach became a Zionist, and encouraged, not encouraged, kind of indirectly endorsed violence, and there grew a rift between Gandhi and Kallenbach.
Yes, this is a second lecture. I would like to return back to you and to give 1.5 hours about this. Actually, what people do not really understand is that Kallenbach was in India on a mission asked by the Jewish Agency to mediate in 1937, to mediate between Jews and Arabs in Palestine. You find some chapters in in 1937, that means there was an urge not to escalate the violence going on since 1929, mostly in the 30s, because of extremists. And Gandhi hesitated to give a public statement. You find this in our biography, And then you see he wanted to return 1 year later, 1938, before Gandhi's statement, with respect to the November pogrom in 1938 in Germany. If I were, he identified with all those who were victims of violence, if I were in Czech, if I were the Jews, was called Ligt. And then, but in that year, it was not possible for Kallenbach to visit Gandhi again in 1938. He could have maybe influenced Gandhi to give some statement in such a way that it could have been a kind of contribution to the conciliation and the mediation. But it was instead Hannah Lazar, the niece of Hermann Kallenbach, who visited Savagya. And 1 year later, 1939, was not just a visit of Kallenbach, but also there was a conference. And in case you are doing a research on these aspects, and then you should find the archive documents in Israel and India on this conference 1939. Maybe, is it possible just to give you this page? This has not been really covered by researchers so far, even in the PDF, yes. Now, go down. See.
You should go up or down.
Up. I will show you the passage.
ஒரு நிமிஷம் கண்டுபிடிச்சிருக்கேன். What page is it? Chapter?
Right here. Go up. You find even enter passages in this. But it's another lecture, but I just want to say that you find a lot of references, and I wonder why there have not been thorough research on this. So it's missing this research. It's high time, I would say, after 30 years. You see a lot of letter excerpts. Yes. Yes. Yeah, yes, you see.
Just a minute. Please.
Before Kallenbach returned to India in January 1939, he forwarded a letter of appeal to Nehru. The treatment of my people in Germany and Austria is such as human beings have rarely been subjected to at any time in the world's history. It's not only the torture, physical and mental, through which about 750,000 people are going, it is the systematic poisoning of the minds of other nations against us on a hitherto unprecedented scale. Kallenbach spoke out against Nazi propaganda, which had spread to South Africa and to India, and worked insidiously as quote, as Nehru confirmed in his reply. Kallenbach's hope during these dark days was to appeal to world conscience. If the conscience of the world is not shaken up by some true man, as in the Dreyfus case, I fear that the example of Germany may spread and we may have to go on. And among the severe critics of Gandhi's statement were Professors Martin Buber and Judah Magnus. This book is completely about this, documenting the texts, who mailed their reply to Gandhi at Sagaon on March 9, 1939. It was some months before the Second World War. The Bombay Zionist Association and the editor of its organ, the Jewish Advocate, Abraham Shochet, who I met personally in Haifa, had countered Gandhi's opinion immediately. Due to Kallenbach's mediation, Shochet spoke with Gandhi personally and expressed his dissent. Shochet's impression was that Gandhi's priority remained the Hindu-Muslim unity in India. On March 22, 1939, the town clerk of Tel Aviv, Joseph Nedivi, Abraham Shochet, Kallenbach, Andrews, C.F. Andrews, Gandhi's secretaries Mahadev Desai and Pierre Naya, and Gandhi himself had a conference on the possible coexistence of Jews and Arabs in Palestine. It was clear to them that the public statement made by Gandhi was irreversible. And now you can say that some mysteries. Why did Gandhi not receive the Buber, mostly the Magnus letter would have been interesting because Magnus wanted to get some practical proposals by Gandhi, so that he did not receive, as he said. So why? And then the second question is what happened at the conference? Is there any protocol? And then also it went on, it was planned that Andrews becomes a mediator and died. I see you are really deep in research, so that's great. But you should really continue that research. It's really precious if you find documents on this. So Andrews, as we know, was related to Tagore as well as Gandhi. So C.F. Andrews, some reference point. England, Woodbrook College, Solihull, near the Bourneville community project of the Cadburys, which you can visit. And so, but maybe I shed even some light. There were other European supporters of Gandhi in South Africa, which one should highlight. I could, for example, find a passage I wrote about the couple Vogel organized bazaars. So was a link between various parts of the communities supporting Gandhi, the Indian community in the Satyagraha. So they organized 3 bazaars at least. So they should also be highlighted. And Sanja Schlesing was quite active, and the women's associations organized, the Tamilian women in particular. So you have to find how to dig out, archaeologically, all these aspects which contributed to the relative success, who recommended Gandhi to become an authority in India on the political arena. But it was not just because of Kallenbach only, of course. But you see how tremendous the contribution of Kallenbach was to prevent a catastrophe from taking place and to enable the community to persevere in the Satyagraha struggle.
Sir, you said you started this get into the research project only 8 years. Right?
Yeah.
What made you to go deep into this and what you don't like even comments? What made you to do this research and do the work on friendship and group?
Yeah, that's good.
Because it is a long
Yeah.
history in
Correct.
it's a quite good people are there along with you.
It was
But you are focused on this. And perhaps you're highlighting more of this. And I didn't go through the book, but I could guess on that. I would like to know whether any specific reason you attracted towards this gentleman and go for this research.
Yeah, that's right. Because of the family inviting me to their private home. And that means there was a wonderful private project to create an exhibition in 3 languages, in Ifrit, Hebrew, in Arab, and in English, and open this at the Ecumenical Center at Tantua between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And it was in autumn 1987, after I finished my studies, diploma studies then, political science, educational science. So I went to Israel for some weeks and visited as a silent servant. I tried to, mediate between the different contributors, Jewish, Arab, and Christian from Europe. So they were organizing this exhibition. It was a very beautiful exhibition. At the opening of this exhibition, I met first time Kallenbach's niece. She went to the opening, and so she invited me to visit her home. And then a friendship started for many years. So I visited first her home in 1987, and the last time I was visiting her was 2007. So, and in the first 10 years, we created this archive and this first concise biography. Now I would say, even now, Kallenbach's contribution in terms of architecture, because he was also an architect for religious buildings of the various communities. So he was not just building huge business houses or so, but also he was influenced by the Bauhaus style. So in German, Walter Gropius, so you can say Kallenbach has not really been portrayed as an architect. His merits as an architect have not been appreciated sufficiently, neither in South Africa nor other parts of the world. And his contribution to this linkage between the skill of craftsmen and the great planner.
It's not been duly recognized.
There should be even a third biography now on Kallenbach. It should be created in such a way that Kallenbach is also portrayed as a very responsible architect. All this, that would be helpful to give back the merits he earned in his life. And I would say one reason why I spent 10 years together with Dr. Isa Sarid, the niece of Hermann Kallenbach, to write his first biography was that I always thought this intercultural cooperation, interreligious, and people from various different, even opposite descendances, and also different lifestyles, and they come together because they feel a sense of justice, and they knew it is now their responsibility to act according to their principles, and they have their role models, let me say, their cherished thinkers, and they wanted to add to this tradition. It's a long tradition, and it's going back to Etienne de la Boétie on nonviolent non-cooperation principle, for the fall of the tyrants. In his Discours de la servitude volontaire, a friend of Montaigne, was one basic writing. So you have this principle in European history. There should be some, say, representation of this influence, mutual influence. And on the other hand, I think that Gandhi was one of those few people who could communicate with people all around the world somehow. He was a correspondent. He was not just a editor and journalist, but he was also a correspondent. He had, like Tolstoy, by the way, he also wrote a letter to Chinese and many Indians he had correspondences with before Taratna does, as we now know. Since Kalidas book on Tolstoy and Gandhi, or Tolstoy in India by Alexander Schiffman, we know that there were some a video of Tolstoy in the Orient in German language. All this letter correspondence of Tolstoy with India. So you have this intercontinental or cross-cultural correspondence here, like Henry David Thoreau was influenced by Indian philosophy, so the first book on this I found in India, in English language, in 1985. So the Indian influence on Henry David Thoreau. So see, it should be, we are all citizens of the world. This is my personal opinion, and I think we should highlight this. First, we are citizens of the world, and second, we should cherish our own traditions, religion, culture, nation, but also listen, learn, lifelong learning day by day. And I would really appreciate research, further research on these topics you mentioned, particularly because there are so many archive documents still to be
Thank you, sir.
discovered.
Really, it's a great job to be done. Perhaps, best of my knowledge, I don't know for my friends. Much light has been thrown on this area, and high focus has been given to this gentleman by you. And after going through the book, I'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you very much. You can find this book on my personal website, and I also, if someone wants, with the reference in the card, and you can also continue the dialogue if you want to. Please continue the dialogue because it will be very helpful.
I love to do that. Perhaps I do more with the people who are talking and dribbling down.
I would say it's important that you continue research on Gandhi and publish, because it will benefit, if you do it in English language, then it will benefit to all those who need. And we should also try to create such a great Gandhi Study Center in Holland, Germany. Of course, it's here that I came to learn actually from about your work and see with my very own eyes what you have created. And I think it's a mutual, maybe mutual learning experience which is necessary. I think you would like to dedicate some of the books to your library, of course.
Before that, we want to.
Before conclusion, we don't have much time. Anamla sir, are you there? With your word, we can conclude the meeting through online, and we can have a further discussion after the meeting, if we want to continue. It is already over. Yeah.
Thank you.
Framework of universities and exhibition catalogs with 13 exhibitions in English language. One on Dr. Schweiz, as references to Gandhi and Tagore. There are some, also additional references that I found. It would be fine to show some of your exhibitions also in German language, in Germany, particularly found out that you created your own exhibitions in the context of the National Gandhi Museum. So whenever you feel impelled, please continue the dialogue. Very happy to meet you here on this occasion. And it will be a great show. It's until my very last breath. If health permits, I will continue this work.
Yeah.
Search for truth. Hermann Kallenbach, Tolstoy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Henry David Thoreau. So at least so many brave women confined in this tradition. So we also created one exhibition on the Red and Roses, Jane Addams, and so references to truth we find in Henry David Thoreau's work. We created an exhibition on Henry David Thoreau's research about truth, the concept of truth, and also in writings of Jane Addams, others, and we should continue this because we create some new exhibition with the Society of Women's Peace History. So it's a work for peace history, and it's more or less a self-educate.
Yes.
That's right.
Sir, Annamlai sir.
Ah,
Annamlai sir wants to give his. Yes, sir. You can talk now.
thank you, Christian, for your wonderful lecture. And
Sir, one minute, sir. Sir, one minute,
yes, when you started your speech, your voice is very so mild.
sir. Sir, one minute.
அதை மியூட் பண்ணுங்க. ஓகே.
Sir, பேசலாம்.
Thank you, Christian. At the start of your speech, your voice is very mild. But when you started talking about the last phase of Satyagraha, your voice is raised. That shows emotionally you are attached with the movement of Satyagraha and Kallenbach's development. So thank you so much. We have very limited time of 1 hour, but as you said, we need to have more dialogue and more conversation. So this is only the beginning, and I hope the members of our Gandhi Study Center will contact you directly to have further information. Thank you so much.
Here with this note, we can officially conclude the meeting. After the meeting, people will